Now in the Black Box with Spider Loke, Most Easty, aka BJ Keyway, and the Google Gang. Let's go!
Listen. Gratitude is the attitude. Show is a blessing. To be back in the Black Box. Black Box.
Relax, roll up as we randomly react to content in these YouTube streets. Yeah. It's time for R&R.
Like with that hustle. Big shout out to my SPI, Spotter Low. You know I'm in the Black Box. Had to come through, tap in, show love one time. Yeah, y'all make sure y'all subscribe. Stay tuned. All that.
The constant, consistent, continuous content creation campaign continues. We 7C riding, GC sliding, G to Google Gang. That's the 3 Gs and the 7 Cs. So y'all see the title. I was shocked to even hear that such a place exists. No further ado, let's see what Mr. Bell Jr. has been up to.
On Saturday, the 17th of September in 2011, a 25-year-old man named Michel Bell Jr. was picked up by a highway patrol officer after running out of gas just outside of the small town of Fireball, California.
Wow, sound like a normal, typical story for an American. You run into a little trouble, good officer, slides by, renders aid. What could go wrong with this? I wonder.
He was then given a ride to the nearest gas station and they dropped him off at around 3:15 in the morning, assuming that he would fill up his tank and be on his way. However, to everybody's surprise, Michel was never seen again. At first, authorities claimed that he'd probably just walked off on foot, but once Michel's car was located a few days later, police discovered that it was still out of gas, with his personal belongings inside. But to add further suspicion, back at his apartment in Los Angeles, food had been left to spoil in the microwave, and his cell phone was also retrieved, meaning his decision to leave was most likely involuntary. However, the deeper you look into this case, the stranger it gets, as the investigators would eventually learn that Michel was returning from a religious retreat, something his family claims changed his behaviour dramatically in the weeks before he vanished. But despite all these bizarre clues, Michel's case has received very limited media coverage, and over a decade later it remains one of California's most unsettling missing person cases, not just because of the way in which he disappeared, but due to the high likelihood that his case was intentionally covered up. So with no answers after almost 14 long years, it's no surprise that his family continues to remain desperate for closure, as they are only left to wonder, what really happened to Michel Bell Jr. and who?
I don't know why that name rings such a bell, and he has a slight familiar look to his face. I know I be saying that often, and I can remember as a kid being in traffic and tell my mom, "Oh, there goes so-and-so." She'd be on the freeway, woof, and get up to him. We get up on the car, and it'll never be him. She'd be like, "Boy, I don't know why I let you do it." But he looked familiar, though. Oh, my mama, man, that name rings familiar.
Could be responsible for his disappearance. Michel Darnell Bell Jr. was born on the 26th of January in 1986 in Cleveland, Ohio, and by all accounts, he was a warm, thoughtful child who carried that caring nature into adulthood. Michel went on to attend Michigan State University, where he played football and earned a degree, balancing athletics with academics before setting his sights on a new chapter in California. Described by family and friends as good-hearted, outgoing and driven, Michel moved to Los Angeles after college, where he settled in Highland Park and started a small non-profit aimed at housing homeless children, a powerful testament to his compassion and community spirit. Michel was also a father, a devoted dad to a young son, with family at the centre of his world. Those who knew him say he had a magnetic smile and was always ready to help someone in need. But around 2010, something began to shift. Michel started exploring new spiritual ideas. He was reading more, asking deeper questions, and gradually distancing himself from old routines. That's when he began associating with a religious group based in Los Angeles, who for legal reasons I will refrain from mentioning by name. Family members say it wasn't like him to become infatuated with a fringe community, but at the time he seemed intrigued by their teachings for one reason or another.
Boy, I wish they would say who it was. I feel like I done crossed this dude's path. Gotta ask some of my folks, because I believe that I have. Oh, my mama.
It's still not clear exactly when the connection became serious, but eventually Michael began attending services regularly and spending more time with members of this group. But outside of his personal interests, Michael was always first and foremost a family man, so in early September of 2011, he had spent some time in LA with his sister, who had been visiting for a few days, before giving her a lift to the airport for her return flight home to Cleveland. Michael was also preparing for a trip to Cleveland himself in the following days, where he was scheduled to meet with his non-profits board and spend time with the rest of his family whilst he was in the area. However, these plans would unfortunately never come to fruition, as just a few days before the trip, Michael's mother would speak with him for the final time as he would disappear into thin air on that fateful day in 2011. On Friday the 16th of September, Michel Bell Jr would make his final known contact with his mother over the phone, when the two spoke sometime in the afternoon, and by all accounts, it was a completely normal conversation. Michael was reportedly in good spirits and even confirmed that he'd be flying to Cleveland just a few days later to spend some much needed time with the family. But after that call ended, there was nothing. No follow-up texts, no check-ins, no updates. And for someone like Michael, who was known to stay in close contact with his loved ones, it became clear that something was wrong. His family tried not to panic at first, hoping maybe he was just busy or that something important had come up. But as the hours passed with still no word, the concern for his well-being began to intensify. So, as the silence continued into Saturday night, the unease had continued to grow. But unbeknownst to his family, at around 2:45 AM that morning, Michael had been picked up by California Highway Patrol officers after his car had run out of gas along Interstate 5, 4 hours north of his home in Los Angeles. He reportedly told the officers he had just left a religious service and asked to be dropped off at a Chevron gas station on West Panoche Road. From there, he was last seen walking toward the restroom area, which was captured by patrol officers, but this would be the last time anyone would lay eyes on Michel Bell Jr. However, at the time, his family had no idea that any of this had been going on, so with little information to work with, the next day multiple family members began calling his friends in LA as they attempted to piece together his last known movements. But despite their efforts, Michael's family were only left with confusion, as there were no signs that he'd made it to Cleveland and no evidence that he'd even bought a plane ticket. So, with far too many unanswered questions and no word from Michael for several days, his family could no longer wait, eventually leading them to officially report him as missing to the local police. On Tuesday the 20th of September, 4 days after anyone had last seen or heard from him, the Los Angeles Police Department would receive a call from a grieving family who were concerned for their loved one. It had now been nearly 100 hours since his last phone call with his mother, and even longer since anyone had physically seen him. And for a man as reliable and communicative as Michael, the silence wasn't just concerning, it was terrifying. His mother Yvonne was adamant that this was not a situation to brush off. She explained how her son was a responsible man and not the kind of person to vanish without communication. So, with their concerns being taken seriously, investigators launched an initial inquiry, starting with Michael's known routines and recent plans. But as they started to gather evidence back at the office, Michael's family decided to take it upon themselves to visit his Highland Park apartment, where the first unsettling clue was discovered. Inside, the lights were on, the microwave door was open with food still sitting inside, and his cell phone had been left behind as well, as if he'd stepped out in the middle of something and never returned. But as strange as that was, it was only the beginning, as when detectives started tracing his last known whereabouts, this is when they learned that in the early morning of September 17th, just a day after his last phone call, Michael had been picked up by the California Highway Patrol officers along Interstate 5, near the small remote town of Fireball. The police officers were then told about how his car had run out of gas, and how he had mentioned to the officers that he'd just left a religious service, before asking them to drop him at a nearby Chevron gas station. to which they obliged before driving off, assuming he would fill up his tank and be on his way. However, when authorities reviewed the body cam footage and dashcam records from that early morning encounter, they began to notice something odd. In the footage, Michael looked dazed, maybe even disoriented, and despite being in the middle of nowhere, he never once mentioned needing help to get home. He didn't call a friend, he didn't request a tow, he just walked away into a nearby restroom, and for a man who was meant to be flying to Cleveland within just days, who had left his cell phone and belongings behind at home, this behaviour didn't make any sense. So detectives decided to take a closer look at this religious group he mentioned, and they began retracing his digital footprint, looking for contacts, messages, or anything pointing to where he had gone after stepping out of that Chevron restroom. And that's when they stumbled across something that would turn the entire case on its head, when an unexpected connection would raise even more questions about who Michael had really been with that day, and why nobody had come forward. On Wednesday the 5th of October, 2 weeks after Michael was officially reported missing, investigators finally uncovered the first truly unexpected connection in the case, when detectives reviewed Michael's brief interaction with the California Highway Patrol officer, which was suspiciously vague. After making this discovery, they dove deeper into Michael's background and discovered that in the weeks before he vanished, he had become increasingly involved with a religious group based out in California. By all accounts, he had been actively studying their materials, attending meetings, and seemed genuinely drawn to its philosophies. So, keen to uncover further details about his affiliation with this group, detectives began combing through emails, phone logs, and online forums, where they uncovered a disturbing pattern of unknown phone calls from a number associated with a religious facility in Central California, as well as sporadic social media messages commenting on spiritual retreats held in the Fresno area. It was then that investigators realized that this wasn't just a case of a stranded man disappearing in rural California, but that it could be a dark shift into the realms of cult dynamics and psychological manipulation, which is when the case began to feel far more dangerous, especially given the fact that he would make the strange decision to leave all his belongings behind. However, despite the efforts of the police and Michael's family to uncover the truth, months would continue to pass with no further updates, eventually causing his case to turn cold as the leads began to dry up. So, after nearly 14 years, Michael still remains missing to this day, as his family continues to hold on to the distant hope that he will one day return home and bring this troubling case to a close. Now, unfortunately, as far as the official investigation goes, this is all we know for now. But despite the lack of updates from law enforcement, Michael's family haven't given up hope. They continue to share his story, raise awareness online, and push for answers in any way they can, refusing to let his case be forgotten. And while there may not be a reward currently on offer, what they're really asking for is something far more valuable than money, which is the truth. The chance to finally understand what happened to a son, a father, and a friend that they've now spent over a decade searching for. However, given that he has now been missing for almost 14 years, alongside the disturbing details that surround the case, I can't help but feel that the likelihood of his safe return
That's a long time.
is only growing weaker as time passes. So with that, let's get into some of the potential theories. Now, if you're familiar with my channel, then you'll know that at this point in the video, I usually begin to explore some of the more commonly discussed theories, in an attempt to bring further attention to the case and to keep the conversation alive. But I do want to acknowledge that these theories can be deeply upsetting to hear, especially for those who are close to the victim, so I'll do my best to tread carefully by refraining from going into any graphic details. So with that being said, one theory that has continued to gain traction over the years is the strong possibility that Michel Bell Jr. may have been the victim of foul play. While the exact timeline of his disappearance remains unclear, we do know that Michael had been in regular communication with his mother during the week he vanished, and he had even spoken to her the day before he disappeared. But after that final conversation, all communication just stopped, meaning something suspicious must have occurred. Some followers of the case believe that something may have happened to Michael shortly after that phone call, possibly while he was on his way to meet up with someone. Though police have never confirmed the names of any persons of interest, it's been speculated that someone within the religious group he was connected to may have played a role in his disappearance. There were also conflicting accounts early on regarding whether Michael left on foot or by car, which only added more confusion. There has been discussion online about the possibility of Michael being captured on surveillance cameras leaving his apartment at 3 PM, just 12 hours before he disappeared, but I've been unable to verify this information. However, if it's true, then this would be incredibly important to take into consideration. But what makes this theory even more alarming is the fact that despite multiple searches and public appeals, Michael's body has never been found, and no credible trace of him has surfaced, not even a single confirmed sighting after he was dropped off at the gas station. So while police haven't officially ruled anything out, the lack of answers has made it difficult for Michael's loved ones to have faith in the system. And over time, many have begun to wonder whether his case was given the urgency it truly deserved, as after 14 years, we are somehow no closer to solving this mystery. However, in my personal opinion, the lack of urgency in Michael's case might not just be the result of accidental police incompetence, but it could be the result of voluntary neglect as a means of protecting someone. So, if for argument's sake, we attempt to explore this theory, who could be that guilty suspect? Well, another theory that people have begun to explore online is the possibility that Fireball, California could be considered a sundown town due to its strikingly low black population and its reputation as a small tight-knit community where outsiders might not be welcomed and secrets can be kept under wraps. According to recent census data, Fireball's population is overwhelmingly Hispanic and white, with only a tiny fraction identifying as black or African American. For Michel Bell Jr, a young black man, this means he would have likely stood out in a place like Fireball, potentially making him more vulnerable to prejudice or hostility from some residents. Many small towns across the US have developed unofficial rules or social codes discouraging or outright forbidding black people from being present after sunset, a concept that was supposed to be left in the past, but has arguably become increasingly more prominent in today's society. So, given the slow progress and lack of leads in Michael's case, it is speculated that this dynamic might have played a role. If Fireball retains any traces of that sundown town mentality, it's possible Michael's presence there, especially at night, put him at risk of a dangerous encounter, which could have contributed to his disappearance. But before I get too carried away, I feel it's important to emphasize that there is currently no concrete evidence linking Michael's case directly to any racial bias or sundown town practices in Fireball, and this is simply a theory based on online statistics. But I must say that this idea does raise necessary questions about how racial bias could have impacted the investigation, especially if the local residents held back evidence as a means of protecting their own. However, ultimately what matters most is that Michel Bell Jr and his family deserve thorough answers, so if there are any long-standing biases or unspoken rules within Fireball's community which could be hindering justice, then it's something that must be addressed publicly to prevent another disappearance from fading into silence. But with that being said, taking a step away from this theory to consider some of the other possibilities, if Michael's disappearance wasn't the result of a local resident, then who else could have been responsible?
Yeah, y'all know what happened to Mike. Y'all know how we get caught up, chained to back of trucks and drug and stuff like that. Leading inched on tree knees, and they say it was C9 suicide. Yeah, right.
Well, according to Michael's friends, one aspect of his life that stood out in the months before his disappearance was his involvement with a religious group he had joined shortly before he went missing. While details about the organisation remain limited, it's been confirmed by his family that Michael had recently become more withdrawn and deeply immersed in the group's teachings, so much so that it had begun to change aspects of his personality. Now, there's no concrete evidence to suggest the group was directly involved in his disappearance, but some theorists have pointed to the timing as suspicious. After all, Michael had only been connected with them for a short period of time, and yet, according to those around him, the transformation in his behaviour was quick and uncharacteristic. There have also been rumours floating around that Michael may have been planning to distance himself from this group, or had at least begun to question certain beliefs or practices, possibly putting him at odds with more senior members. So if this is true, then it's not impossible to consider that someone in the group may have seen him as a liability. After all, according to the highway patrol officer who picked him up that night, Michael admitted that he didn't enjoy the retreat. To take this theory a bit further, some have speculated that after confiding in someone about wanting to leave, that this conversation may have reached the wrong ears, leading to a confrontation that spiraled out of control. This would explain his sudden decision to abandon his apartment, leaving behind his cell phone and food in the microwave. However, what weakens this theory is the lack of formal investigation into the group itself. To this day, no public statements have been made by members of the organisation, nor has any law enforcement action been taken to question or clear them. So while this theory remains a strong one in the eyes of the public, it continues to live in the realms of speculation, at least for now. But despite this, many continue to wonder why more hasn't been done to look into them, and whether investigators truly explored this angle as thoroughly as they should have, perhaps due to an affiliation with the investigating police or the highway patrol officers. However, on a slightly different note, the lack of answers in this case has also led some people to ask whether this hesitance to pursue difficult leads might be part of a larger systemic problem, one that reflects how missing black men are often overlooked and denied the same investigative resources as others. After all, the guilty suspect could just be a local resident that spotted Michael that night and took his life. And yet, if this was true, the police would have no idea who this person was, despite the fact that there could be a killer on the loose in Fresno County. So I truly hope, for the sake of everyone involved in this case, including the locals who live near the location that Michael disappeared from, that we do eventually get a conclusion, as I can't help but feel that there could still be a dangerous presence lurking in the small town of Fireball. But just before I move on from the theory of this religious group being somehow connected to his disappearance, another point which I feel needs to be made is that there is a small possibility that Michael could still be alive and is living on a religious compound somewhere out in California. This certainly wouldn't be the first time a person has left their family and worldly possessions behind in order to start a new life with a religious group. In fact, for most cults, it's typical that when you officially join, you agree to cut off all contact with your family as a means of control. So if Michael was really serious about this religious group he had been communicating with, then this could explain why he has been silent for so long. I actually covered a missing person case over a year ago about a man named Emilio Ganem, which involved a cult that was based out in California of all places, and there was a strong belief that they could have kidnapped him after he decided to leave. If you're interested in this case, I'll leave a link in the description so you can check it out after this. But for the purposes of this video, the important detail to mention is that the cult have since refused to comment on their relationship with Emilio, meaning he remains missing to this day. So with this in mind, maybe a similar situation could have occurred to Michel Bell Jr. Perhaps he left by choice, or maybe he was forced, but either way, there is a small chance that he could still be alive somewhere in California, living out his days on a secure compound, unable to leave. But as with all of these theories, until we have concrete proof, there
unable or unwilling to leave.
really isn't much more I can say outside of speculation. But as concerning as it may sound, if this theory was true, it would probably be the best case scenario, given the fact that it would mean Michael was still alive. However, until more evidence is brought forward, we have to continue to hold out hope that it will only be a matter of time before the case of Michel Bell Jr. is solved, bringing his family the closure they deserve, once and for all. Now, just before I end the video, there was one last theory that I wanted to personally raise, as in all honesty, this story has really struck a nerve with me, given its similarities to another case I covered just over a year ago about a victim named Ryan Singleton. But firstly, before I get into the theory itself, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this case, I will just provide a quick rundown of the details to give you some context. So, on the 9th of July in 2013, a 24-year-old model named Ryan Singleton was driving his car through the Mojave Desert on his way back to LA after spending the day in Vegas, when his car suddenly broke down. A passing highway patrol officer noticed Ryan walking along the side of the road and offered to drive him to a nearby town to get further assistance. He then called one of his friends for help and agreed to meet them at the rest stop, but in a strange twist of fate, once the friend arrived to pick him up, Ryan had mysteriously disappeared. A missing person report was filed the very next day, but there would be no real updates in the case until almost 2 months later, when his decomposing remains were finally discovered in the middle of the desert. Initially, it was assumed that this was just a tragic accident. However, when the coroner's report came back a few weeks later, it was soon revealed that Ryan's body was missing at least 6 of its organs. But despite uncovering these terrifying details, after 12 long years of investigating, we are still awaiting a verdict from the police on what really happened that day, which feels hauntingly familiar when you compare this case to the disappearance of Michel Bell, as there are some glaring similarities that, in my opinion, are certainly worth exploring. Firstly, both Ryan and Michel were young black men at the ages of 24 and 25, who had solid relationships with their family and friends and bright futures ahead of them. But the detail that sticks out to me is that both men were supposed to be returning to Los Angeles when their cars broke down after running out of gas. And another eerily similar connection is that both men were picked up by local highway patrol officers who gave them lifts to the nearest gas stations before they would mysteriously disappear. However, the similarities do not stop there, as both men were deeply involved in personal transitions at the time of their disappearances. While Ryan was navigating a career shift and had just returned from an opportunity out in Vegas, Michel had recently joined a controversial religious group. These kinds of major life changes often raise red flags in missing person cases, yet in both instances, authorities seemed quick to downplay any potential risk, initially suggesting that the men may have simply walked away voluntarily. But the final nail in the coffin, in my opinion, is the uncomfortable but necessary question of racial bias that must be addressed. In Ryan's case, his family fought for weeks to be taken seriously, with many feeling that if he was of a different racial background, the urgency and scale of the search would have looked very different. And unfortunately, Michel's case suffered the same response: limited media attention, slow-moving updates, and minimal pressure applied in the early days of the investigation. So, when we look at these cases side by side, it becomes clear that these are not just isolated incidents, but that there is a disturbing pattern emerging where young black men can go missing, only for their cases to be misclassified or fall through the cracks. So, until we start acknowledging these patterns and treating every missing person case with the same intensity, regardless of race or background, I fear that we'll continue to see stories like Ryan's and Michel's go unanswered, and I think we can all agree that this is something we simply cannot allow. Because the truth is, behind every one of these cases is a family who is grieving and holding on to hope. So we have to do everything in our power to make sure that their voices are heard, in order to ensure that cases like these do not become just another story left unsolved. Anyway, on that note, I think I'll leave this video here. But as always, if you have any other theories of your own which you think may help explain what really happened to Michel Bell Jr. or Ryan Singleton, please leave your ideas in the comments down below and I'll do my best to get back to you. But until next time, thank you so much for watching, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for updates on these stories. Also, if you found this video interesting, feel free to check out the playlist on screen now, which covers the many other cases of young men who continue to disappear across America, never to be seen alive again.
Getting hard trying to live in this land, Lord. I'm sick of paying rent, I wanna be the landlord. Not too many children in my section 8 last night. Lights out, they on section 8. We get constipated from that government cheese. Paying taxes, steady get a government cheese. Don't nothing change no matter who we vote for. So why waste time even going to try to vote for? When you grind so hard, you supposed to see profit. Why we so broke? We supposed to be prophets. We never had a choice on coming to America. I feel something real bad is coming to America. I don't write the mayor, they say I got a right to, but I don't even know where a nigga supposed to write to. I keep my chest up and head to the sky, until the day I burn or head to the sky. There was many bad days, Lord, I've had hills to climb and sleepless nights, but when I look around and see what you've done for me, I say thank you, Lord, and I won't complain. I'm no devil, I know that I'm godson, but I still smoke weed with my godson. And even though they say the woman is the backbone, we just wanna see them laying on their backbone. Thumb through the word, but you know what's confusing? Between the experts, it's so much confusion. I want it all, for all that I care about. I want a ball, that's all that I care about. Travel 50 states, broke 48 laws. Ran across a book called 48 Laws. Some say it's bad, some say it's a good book. I say it ain't got nothing on the good book. I ain't tripping on going to the motherland. On the other hand, I like to buy my motherland. What price can we all get peaceful? Stay at war and swear that we peaceful. What's wrong? Can't we all get along? Wanna buy a home, but can't get along. I'm trying to stay focused and write the right rhymes, cause these days everybody write rhymes. My uncle went to the rehab, hooked on morphine. It seems he came out even more fiend. Don't wanna see cuz die or blood bleed. We all lose every time black blood bleed. Holla Hail Mary, a light no candle, but I'm still trying to handle what I can do. I go hard for what I need, so it's ample. Watch me, you won't need no example. Crucial situation, my life in a crisis. Need to trade my life in for crisis. Please forgive me for what I did last night. I don't know, this might be my last night.
You know, I'm in the black box, had to come through, tap in, show love one time. Yeah, y'all make sure y'all subscribe. Stay tuned, all that.
It's the homie cook-up boss, goddammit, Cub Low. And y'all tuning in to the Wake and Bake Show with goddammit the homeboy Spider Low.
Here with SPI, the realest nigga in LA.
Spider this bitch!
My nigga Spider Low. Spider Low, nigga.
Spider Low.
It's Spider Low.
Spider Low.
Spider Low.
Spider Low.
So Spider looks at me because we go back to the juvenile side of the county.
What the fuck?
My nigga.
Spider Low. Spider Low.
Shout out to SPI, that motherfucking nigga.
Spider Low, Wake and Bake. Better keep it Google, nigga.
Loke is in LA somewhere doing what he's doing.
In the words of Spider Loke on my mama's mama.
Spider Loke's gear. This is Bay Mac.
Nate Bud, C-Mac. Shout out my Loke, Spider Loke, huh? Nate Bud, on hood. It's a beautiful world. You fight me? Fight, cred.
Point blank, through no subliminal dissing. When I listen, I can tell you never been on no mission. Sticking to the script, don't care if I offend you. Neighborhood crib, the marathon continue.
My competition, never seeing them. I done trained my mind that I'm going. You could tell by how I walk, talk, I'm a boss. A east side millionaire, homie, what you thought? My life is a movie. They can't get close to me. They mad cause they can't be. I'm everything that they wanna be, yeah.
You are now in the black box. Whoa. With Spider Loke, Most Easty, aka BJ Keyway, and the Google Gang.
Let's go!